This is inside the Arizona coronavirus numbers. We just want to help everybody understand the numbers a little bit better. Garrett and I sit next to each other pretty close at work, and now we're obviously miles apart having this conversation. But I think diving into the numbers is so important because we don't want to help you decide how to feel. We want you to understand how to dive into the numbers so you can figure out what you should do to best protect your family from the coronavirus. So, Garrett, you've been digging into these numbers forever. I know every day lately we've just been hitting all these new records out there. Today's number that was so concerning was really the death count that came out. 79 was on the chart. That does not mean 79 deaths in the last 24 hours.
No. So yes, today's number of 79 deaths. That's the largest death number we've had on record so far. What we're seeing and what we're hearing from the AZDHS is that what they did was they did what's called they looked through what they say is they looked through the death certificates. What that means is they did a match. They did a match of vital statistics with the hospitals and with other healthcare providers, and basically went through and swept a bunch of records of people who died from coronavirus that they had not picked up yet. So these numbers are this 79 is a very high number, but we're not entirely sure yet if this number is going to be it's not going to be a new normal, but it's certainly not going to be a trend right now. This number tomorrow and the next day should go back down into the 20s and the teens. What we're really looking for is we don't want daily deaths in the 30s and 40s without an explanation from the AZDHS as to being some sort of match.
And this was something that they've done before. They've done one of these sort of look backs before.
Correct. Yes. So in fact, they did it last. It was on, I believe, it was on May 8th. We had another record day. I'm just going to run to my Excel spreadsheet really quick just to check that I have the right one. Yes, we had a number of 67 on May 8th was the last time they did a match. And then after that, the numbers went back down into the 20s and 30s for the rest of the month. So we are seeing, this match I don't want to say it inflated the number because it's a death number. Unfortunately, these people died from coronavirus. It was just people that the county health departments had not flagged yet as to have died on their death certificate. So now they have these people in the system. And I'm going to show you what that looks like really quick. I'm going to share my screen and show you what the actual number looks like. So
while you're pulling that up, Garrett, I know we're getting a lot of comments coming in, and I want to let everybody know who's commenting. We'll work through some of these, and we'll answer some of your questions here. So post them right there, and we'll get to them. In the meantime, Garrett's going to share this stat that he just pulled up with us.
Okay, so this is a graph I do on a daily basis. What you're seeing here is it's what's called an epi curve. So this is the actual date that's recorded on the death certificate for people who have died of coronavirus. The dark blue are the numbers that had been added previous to today. So anything that had been put into the system prior to today. And then the light blue numbers are what was added today, these 67 deaths. As you can see, the majority of these deaths were added in the last 14 days. This is a very common occurrence with this epi curve is you will see most of the numbers being added in the last 7 to 14 days. But as you can see, because this was a match of some sorts, you see these light blues sprinkled all across May and June. So as you can see, there were certain records that the Department of Health did not catch. The little line you're seeing right here is a 7-day rolling average. And this represents sort of this what is the record right now. 28, I believe it is, on one day, but you can see now we have some 26s right here. We've got these 3 days right here. So right now our trend on the 7-day average has gone up.
So it's important to look at the week-to-week numbers because you kind of get a better idea than the day-to-day variation that sort of comes in.
Yes. So you always, whenever you want to look at sort of looking for a trend in the numbers, you want to do what's called a 7-day average. What that does is that alleviates any problems you would have with the data because of weekend reporting issues. There's always a weekend lag where if you look at the numbers on a Sunday or Monday, you're like, oh, there's only one death was reported. And I believe actually that is the case. I think only one death was reported on Sunday. It was
Right.
so it was only one death, but that was a situation in which coroner offices or someone was not open to record those numbers, so they did not get to the AZDHS until Tuesday or Wednesday. So you use that 7-day average to sort of smooth out that issue and actually see what's actually going on.
Okay, so let's dive into the 7-day average, because a lot of times we're hearing from people, I'm hearing it a ton on my Facebook page, more tests equals more cases, more tests equals more cases.
Right.
Obviously, that part is true. So a metric that you and I have been looking at so much more closely over these past few weeks and months is the rate, because the rate is going to show how that all is in a ratio together to help us better understand these numbers. And that percentage has gone up. I know, we saw one high point during the height of the lockdown and the pandemic. It started to go back down, and then we bounced back up, and every single week we've seen it higher and higher. Where are we today?
Yes, so let's go to the AZDHS dashboard. This is where all of the main numbers are. I'm going to share that really quick and sort of show where we are. I've got right here the laboratory testing portion of the AZDHS's numbers. The first thing I'm going to do is take it to only PCR testing. Now, just to make an explanation for anyone who doesn't know, the two types of testing there is for coronavirus is the PCR and the serology test. The PCR is the diagnostic swab that tells if a person is actually an active carrier of coronavirus, and then serology is the blood test antibody to check for antibodies. So while both of these tests are added into the dashboard, we're going to focus only on the PCR tests. So we can see right here this 10.7% total positive. This number has gone up for several weeks now, gradually. But I want to focus on this right here. As you can see, back in May, we had this 36,000 tests with about 5% positive. And as you can see, Katie, we have absolutely increased testing. We've done more than half of our testing just in the last couple of weeks. But as you can see, the problem is the rate of the positives has started to skyrocket. You've got a 21% positive just so far, just in this last week. That's 71,000. So one of every 5 tests that have been collected in the week of June 14th have come back positive. That's a very concerning number. Yeah,
just anecdotally, personally, I had friends and family who had it early on. Then I had a little lull of knowing nobody who was sick. And now, just within the past few weeks, I've gotten, messages from friends and family and loved ones saying, these people are sick. So we're seeing definitely more people coming forward. As far as this percentage, everyone we've talked to, we're not in the peak yet.
So yes, what the other thing is obviously has been a big sort of discussion point in coronavirus is the modeling. Mm-hmm. And I know that a lot of people are wary of modeling, as they should be. Modeling is an imperfect way to estimate what's going on with coronavirus. We've seen models that have had, initially we had models that had our infections of like 2 million people just in the state alone. Mm-hmm. But as time has gone on, the models have gotten a lot of data. There's a ton more data fed into these models now, and so they are getting more accurate. And what we see right now is most of the major modeling is showing that we are going to be having a peak in mid-July. It used to be mid-June, that's what it was, but now with all of the data that's being fed into them and showing how our numbers are going up, we've moved to a mid-July peak.
One of the questions, I want to let you finish your thought there first.
Well, I was going to say one of the models that is used a lot, the IHME model, that's one of the models that are being used for to estimate hospitalizations. And I checked it this morning, and so far it still says that it right now says we will not be exceeding our hospital capacity, but we will be maxing out our hospital capacity at this point, is what it thinks we're doing. Again, this is a model, it's estimating. It's an estimate.
Did it still have about 7,000 deaths predicted in Arizona?
I believe it was about 6,000. I have it pulled up on a different screen. And that's still, in my opinion, the 5,600 is probably still, well, excuse me, let me walk that back. It used to be a estimate to August. Now it's an estimate to October, right. And it's saying 5,700 to October 1st. I think just looking at how the numbers have gone and what our daily numbers are, that seems to be a fairly, I don't want to say conservative estimate, but it's probably within the range of what we're going to see in October.
Right. One of the big questions we always get, and it was one of the questions that came in earlier on my Facebook page, is about the percentage of people who actually end up in the hospital from coronavirus. And that's one of the numbers being tracked in the state as well. Have you been looking at that one closely or seen it fluctuate?
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. So that number is, what the interesting thing about that number is we have two sort of data sets to look at for hospitalizations. We have the AZDHS's, their epi curve as to what they think that the hospitalization is going to be. And then they have the self-reported by the hospital's COVID-19 metrics. I'm going to go back to the AZDHS screen here really quick.
Okay.
Here we go. So we have two tabs here that deal specifically, well, we have three actually: hospitalization, hospital bed usage and availability, and COVID-specific metrics. This particular tab right here, hospitalization, shows what AZDHS has recorded in hospitalization. Right now it says it's at 4313. Although you can see this curve has a very aggressive fall off right here. I don't use this curve a lot or this number because of this aggressive fall off. It always appears that hospitalizations are down. And that's just not the case. So this is just this curve takes about 14 days to fill in.
And I think here at the bottom, doesn't it say of these charts how many days backfilling they have to do? I had the same thing happen.
Yes.
Where it sent me a snapshot of it and said, no, we're going down. But I think it's right there on the very bottom of your screen under this graphic that we have. I'm not seeing it there. But
One of them does. I think the death one has that. This one should actually have that too, in my opinion.
So when you're out there making choices for your families, be sure to look at that little note that's at the bottom, because it'll usually say, this takes 3 to 5 days to back populate, or 14 days to back populate, because you look at that curve and think, oh, we're in better shape, and that might not be the case, and that might change your personal decisions.
Exactly. So we're going to spend a little time right here on this graph. This is the self-reported by the hospitals, the total capacity they have in the system right now. So the dark red indicates beds in use, and the gray is the beds available. This is for the ICU graph, and as you can see, we are at a record today. 88% of the ICU beds are reported as being occupied yesterday. What you can see, though, is before that, prior to that moment, we really were at sort of a plateau of 83, 84, 85% from about June 16th. And then we have this pickup right here. And you'll see this as well with inpatient beds. You see this gradual increase of inpatient beds. ED is emergency room beds. This is not a metric that you want to look at for occupation, because as everyone knows, when people go into the emergency room, they don't always need a bed for the day, but this count is only done once a day. So this is sort of a softer metric than the inpatient. We're going to scroll right over to these. These are very important metrics to monitor. And these are the COVID-19 possible or suspected, very important. And as you can see, this is the inpatient, the general care acute beds. Prior to this increase in cases, acute care beds were only making up about a quarter of the amount of occupied beds. Now they're making up almost about 35, 36, 37%. We hit another record today at 2270. So this 2270 is the number of COVID patients right now that are in the hospital. And we have metrics for everything on the hospitals. The ICU, there's about 580. And then we also have the people who went into the emergency room. And there was about 1,200 people that visited the emergency room looking for, seeing if they had COVID. So these are the hospitalization metrics that we pay attention to. And as you can see, this has been a gradual climb, a fairly aggressive climb in occupation here. And what we're looking for is this to start to level off. That's what we really need to see right now.
Some of the numbers that we look at, I know, sort of lead into other numbers. So if you see, to start way in the beginning, something that we're not tracking necessarily, like the line at the Walgreens to get testing. You start to see that line get long, and then you start to see more tests come in, and then you start to see more positive results, and then you start to see more hospitalization. So it's got this trickle down effect, and that also includes deaths. And I know a lot of people are punching in and doing the math on the death rate here in Arizona and say, it's only 2.3% or 3% at this point. You look at the U.S. percentage, and it's almost double that, if 5 to 6%. That is only because we lag in time, right? At this point?
Yeah, we're expecting, so deaths lag about 27 days. So we are at a situation right now where we are not quite at that 27-day point where the cases really started to pick up. So what the fear is, and I don't of course know what's going to happen, but the fear is that the death number is going to start increasing to correlate with the rise once we get to that 27-day mark.
Yeah, so I've seen people post the death rate is down. It's not.
It's not. It's steady right now. Even with today's number, it is, again, you saw that it is slightly higher, but it hasn't really picked up at an alarming rate yet. So and we presume that's going to happen only because of the number of cases and hospitalizations we've seen, but we don't know yet. The other thing, of course, is that most of the cases that we've seen in the last several weeks have been driven by an age group that is not as susceptible to hospitalizations. It's been driven by the 20 to 44-year-olds. They've sort of grown at exponential rates compared to some of the other age groups. And so what that does is that sort of creates a false curve where the hospitalization curve will not be the same and the death curve won't be the same as the actual case curve, simply because you're going to have many less 20 to 44-year-olds are going to die from coronavirus than of the high-risk group.
What number are you watching closest, or what number do you what's the first thing you check in the morning that you're like, I want to see where this number is today? Is there one?
I go to the summary page every morning first, and I plug in the summary data. The first thing right now I'm checking is obviously if the trend line is moving in one direction or the other from week to week. Is the first thing I check. I check to see what the prior, if it's a Wednesday, I check to see what last Wednesday was like, and then the Wednesday before. I sort of give a 2-week window of checking to see what the numbers are like. And then I try to do that on a week by week. I try to aggregate it into the week as well to see what things are like. So those are the first things I check just on cases. I've started getting into now checking the age groups as well, just to see if we're, like today's, for example, today's increase, which was fairly small compared to what we've seen, 1463. The age groups all sort of grew at the same rate today. And what I want to see is that starting to happen. I want to see them start to equalize out in their increases rather than having it being driven by one specific age group.
Mm-hmm. I know there's other metrics on this site as well. It goes pretty deep, and it used to only come out at 9 o'clock in the morning. They've sort of changed that, right? I want to explain this to folks so that when they get up in the morning, they can go check the numbers as well. Your Twitter account is a great spot to go kind of see everything put together, and Facebook and all the other places. But to get real numbers that specific people are looking for, maybe they only want to look up their own age group or something like that. They're putting this information out staggered now.
Yeah, so they had to put together, I talked to them about this, they had to put together a staggered strategy of releasing this data because they were getting hit so hard at 9 o'clock with all of the web scrapers and all of the other people that were hitting them at 9 o'clock. It was actually it was breaking their servers. It happened about 2 or 3 days in a row. So now what they do is they release it at any given time between 8 and 9. And really, it's really between 8 and 9. It usually shows up, I mean, I'd say 8:15 to 8:45. At any time, it's going to show up between that time. So it's no longer a situation where you can sit there and push refresh at 9 o'clock and it's going to show up at 9:02. It will show up at any time in the 8 o'clock hour.
Boy, I noticed, especially as unfortunately Arizona became a national story in this, that really it was shutting down every day at that point. I mean, it was a distinct change when we hit our I don't know, point of attention from the whole nation.
Yeah, well, it was the point of attention to the world. I mean, the day it shut down, there was a major BBC story on that as well. So, we started to shift. At first, the servers were all, the traffic was all local, and then it went national, and then it went global, and that's when it started to break.
Yeah. What is not being tracked? I know there's a lot of discussion about recoveries, and the media never shows recoveries and all of that.
Yeah.
There is one site, through Johns Hopkins, and they use covidtracking.com and some other places to pull some recovery numbers. Do you know specifically where those recovery numbers are coming from?
Yes, they are the hospital discharge numbers on the AZDHS website. They are specifically using that metric, and they are putting the word recovery on there, but it is the hospital discharges. Of the epidemiologists that I've talked to, a lot of them are not comfortable using the hospital discharge number. In fact, the true recovery number is probably higher than that anyway. We have some counties are starting to report recovery numbers. They have different methodologies on how to do that. That's one of the reasons why the AZDHS hasn't given us recovery numbers yet, is because no one is in agreement as to what a recovery from coronavirus looks like. We have some counties are starting to say, well, if 28 days have passed, and this sounds morbid, I'm sorry, but if 28 days have passed and you're not dead and you're not in the hospital, then we're going to consider you a recovery. Some of the counties say, well, once we actually talk to you for the last time and you say, yep, I'm fine, and we close the case on you, we mark you as a recovery. So it's been those two things, that sort of time interval of survival and then closing the case at the county health department are the only two ways I've sort of seen that. And then, of course, like I said, just because for lack of a statewide number, Johns Hopkins uses that hospital discharge number.
Yeah. Is that what you've seen other states doing as well? I mean, is anybody tracking this at this point?
I have not seen a lot of recovery numbers at the state levels. The health departments, again, the epidemiologists, sorry, I have a hard time with that word, don't agree on what a recovery looks like. So a lot of the health departments are very hesitant about putting out those numbers. And when we've seen that, Maricopa County doesn't put out, their county health department doesn't put out a recovery number. So we do have some, but we don't have a lot. So we don't have enough to compile a recovery number for the state at this point. I'm working with some people to figure out a formula on how to do it. Hopefully we'll have something we agree on at some point soon. But I'm not going to promise anything quite yet.
Yeah, you spend pretty much your whole day putting these numbers together behind the scenes.
Yeah, it's about 2 hours of data collection, and then the remainder of the time is either the automated analysis portion, and then trying to find other ways to analyze geographically or in other categories, figure out other ways to pull numbers out.
What are you seeing geographically?
We've seen, I haven't looked today, unfortunately, but what we have seen is that a lot of the growth has shifted to the urban centers in Phoenix, and that's sort of a new development. When we first started out here, the hardest hit areas of Arizona was the north, and then it shifted to the southern border counties of Yuma, Santa Cruz, and Cochise, and it is now shifting back into the urban centers. We're seeing a lot more growth in downtown Phoenix in those areas than we've seen before.
How do you feel about the zip code tracking? I always find that somewhat of a difficult metric, because every zip code is a different size. Every zip code is a different population. I think it's a important factor if you want to see how your neighborhood's doing, but to compare zip code to zip code, it might be apples to oranges there.
Agreed. I wouldn't really compare zip codes to zip codes because there's a lot of dissimilarities there. I think it's a proxy for that region. There is some problem with zip codes. If there's a hospital in the zip code, there could be an inflated number of cases, because a lot of patients may have their hospital zip code as given to the AZDHS. So you might see inflated numbers, and we've seen that actually for a while in Tucson. The one of the leading zip codes for quite some time was the zip code that had Tucson Medical Center in there, and all of the other zip codes surrounding that were nowhere near as bad for the longest time. So it was sort of obvious that this was because of Tucson Medical Center and any long-term care facilities that may have been attached or around Tucson Medical Center, the CMS certified long-term care facilities, because the spread at that time was also very aggressive in the long-term care facilities. We've actually started to see that recede. We don't get a lot of numbers on long-term care facilities, but what we do get from Maricopa County and some other places, we're starting to see some receding in the growth rate in the long-term care facilities.
Can you help people with where to find that? That's a question I get a lot in how to direct that information over there, because
Sure.
They want to sort of compare that situation versus an at-home situation.
Yes, I'm just taking my laptop here really quick. So let me just go to where you're supposed to go. All right. So it is, I'm going to come back really quick and then share my screen.
Perfect.
So this is where you go to get, where'd it go? Right there. Sorry. All right. This is where you go for Maricopa County. It is maricopa.gov. Well, actually, I would really just Google Maricopa County COVID because the URL is a little on the confusing side. But this is where you go to compare the county health numbers to the state. They give a basic, sort of high level right here. And then there's this blue link, view additional COVID information. I don't know if it's going to come up and you can see it. But right there is a PDF that they produce every day that has all of their information on there. And you can even see their past reports right here. And it has all their past reports it says it just goes on for a long time. So Maricopa County has always been excellent with data collection and data archiving. So you can see everything there to compare what the AZDHS has. But we don't even get that from the state. We don't get this sort of collection from the state as far as keeping that data in one place, and we can look day by day what actually happened.
Yeah, it's nice to be able to, for a frame of reference, to be able to look back at the Maricopa County stuff.
Yeah, if you want to look at the state stuff day by day, you have to go to covidtracking.com. That is the project that is tracking all of the states and takes a snapshot of Arizona's dashboard every single day, at least the summary dashboard. So you can go back all the way to the very beginning with covidtracking.com and see what the state was reporting on that day. Yeah.
Who's running that website? Do you know?
It's a conglomerate of journalists. I don't know the person right now, but it's a bunch of journalists that put that together.
Yeah, I have to be honest. When I first went on there and it was a .com, I was a little worried. Like, okay, where's this coming from? Are these numbers safe? Are these numbers that we can trust? And
yeah, it had some growing pains in the beginning. They were adding Navajo Nation data on top of our data, and the Navajo Nation reports to the county health department. So we were inflated for a while, but they corrected that, and so now it's as good a data as you can get. That's on a day-by-day basis.
Yeah, that's one of the other questions I get quite often is, are the Navajo Nation numbers compiled into the state of Arizona numbers?
Yes, they are. They're sometimes a little bit more lag, but yes, they do get reported to the county health departments. If you go on any county health department up there, Apache County, Navajo County, you'll see they'll usually have some sort of breakout that says, X amount of cases on tribal land and Y amount of cases not on tribal land. So you will see just that definitive proof that the Navajo numbers are the reservation numbers are in the state numbers.
That breakdown. All right. Well, I think unless there's anything else you want to add, we can wrap it up for today. As we're doing that, I want to let everybody know that we're going to try to hop on here again tomorrow, hopefully around the same time. There's several news conferences, as you know, in the state of Arizona in the afternoons. So sometimes we'll have to adjust just a little bit, but we'll be back to break down some of those numbers for you again tomorrow. Was there anything else, Garrett, you wanted to add about today's numbers coming in?
No, I think we covered it pretty well. We have to watch that death number going forward and see what happens in the next 5 days or so.
Yeah, for sure. All right. We want to thank everybody for tuning in. And Garrett, we thank you for your expertise, and we'll chat again tomorrow. Be safe, everybody.